Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating framework, one that looks at the Qur'an not just as a book of scripture, but as a kind of self-verifying computational system. We're going to explore this idea that the entire history of prophecy is actually the story of a cosmic equation being solved.
So, let's kick things off with a pretty wild idea, one that comes right out of the source material. What if the story of the prophets in the Qur'an isn't just history? What if it's the universe working through a massive problem? A problem that starts with a fundamental split that has to be put back together.
According to this framework, the Qur'an states the problem right at the beginning. It gives us a ratio between two names for God, Raḥmān and Raḥīm. They both come from the same source, but they represent different aspects of mercy. And the idea is that the entire text that follows, well, that's the story of this ratio being computed.
And at the absolute heart of this whole thing is a single governing equation. The entire goal is to get two opposing forces, which this system calls Raḥīm and Razim, to balance out so perfectly that they equal 1. And when that happens, it signals a return to total unity, a state the source calls Raḥmān. Okay, so let's dive into the mechanics of this. Our first step is to figure out how the system even creates the duality it needs to get started. I mean, you can't solve an equation if you don't have a problem in the first place, right? So the first operator in the system is called Razim. You can think of it like a compression function or a simple binary split, kind of like dividing a number by 2. Its whole job is to draw a line in the sand, to split one whole thing into two distinct parts. That's what creates the initial tension. And this isn't just some abstract concept. The source material points to a very specific moment in the Qur'an to ground this idea, the command to prostrate before Ādam. That one command acts like a switch, and it instantly splits the entire field into two opposite camps, everyone who obeyed and the one, Iblīs, who refused.
Now, what's really interesting is that this first split immediately creates these mirrored pairs. You've got Iblīs and Īsā, or Jesus, who are shown to hold the very same structural position. They're both called servants, but they give the exact opposite response to that divine command. One represents potential that's refused, just held back, while the other represents that same potential being processed, purified, and realized.
And you can see this pattern echo down into the very next generation through these father-son relationships. So you have one pair, Ādam and his son Qābil, who basically repeats that initial error of refusal, this time through jealousy. But then you get another pair, Āzar and his son Ibrāhīm, or Abraham, who shows the system's ability to correct itself, where the son actually fixes the father's mistake.
So let's move on to the next layer and see how this all builds. Because once you've created a split, a separation, the system needs a way to actually process the tension and the pain that comes from it.
And that brings us to the second operator, which is called Raḥīm. Now, if Razim was all about compression and splitting, Raḥīm is all about expansion. It's kind of like the function 3n plus 1. It takes those separated pieces and puts them under incredible pressure, generating all the complexity and mass needed for them to transform and eventually come back together.
And right at the center of this whole interaction, the source material points to a kind of central processing unit, a conversion node that it calls Kitab, or the mother of the book. You can really think of it as the engine at the heart of the system. It takes in all this pressure and pain as input, and it converts it into something pure on the other side. So what exactly fuels this engine? Well, the source talks about two different kinds of input, and both are forms of pain. The first is internal pain. You have the prophet Yūnus, or Jonah, who experiences this absolute maximum compression from inside the belly of the whale, and his computation, his way of processing it, is simple: confession. The second type of input is external pain. This is the prophet Ayyub, or Job. He experiences everything being stripped away from the outside: his health, his family, his money, until there's almost nothing left but his absolute core. And what's his computation? Pure patience, enduring it all without blaming anyone. And this is a really crucial point. In this framework, suffering isn't just random or some kind of punishment. The pain is the computation. It is the Raḥīm operator doing its job at full throttle, expanding the system and forcing it towards a final resolution. All right, so we've had the split and we've had the intense interaction. Now the system is designed to resolve itself. This is the closure phase. This is where that big equation we saw at the beginning finally balances out. This final state of resolution is called Raḥmān. Now, what's really key here is that Raḥmān isn't another operator like Razim or Raḥīm. It's not another gear in the machine. Instead, it's described as the underlying field of unity itself.
It's the constant, whole, and perfect state that the entire process has been trying to get back to all along.
And here it is, the elegant solution. When the output from that expansion engine, Raḥīm, is perfectly balanced by the output from the compression engine, Razim, the whole ratio just resolves. The equation equals 1, which signifies perfect, unbroken unity and a return to the source.
And this closure isn't just an idea, it's shown through the stories of these final prophetic figures. In their stories, both Yūsuf, or Joseph, and Ismail, or Ishmael, are described as ransomed sons. One is saved from a pit, the other from sacrifice. According to this framework, that act of being ransomed is the closure. It's the moment the cosmic debt is paid, the hand of God releases the sun, and the books are finally balanced.
Okay, we've gone through the split, the interaction, and the closure. So let's put it all together now and take a look at the complete operational flow of what the source calls the 237 computational engine.
You know, when you step back and look at the whole thing, it's this beautiful, simple, three-stage loop. First, Layer 2 creates a split, which sets up the problem. Then, Layer 3 processes those separate parts through intense trial and transformation. And finally, Layer 7 brings it all back home to a state of resolved unity. It's just split, process, and return. And this table here, it just lays it all out beautifully. You can see each layer, 2, 3, and 7, and how it's linked to its specific name, its core function, and even its mathematical analogy. It's a perfect little map of the entire computational engine.
What makes this model even more wild is that its structure looks a lot like a famous unsolved problem in math called the Collatz conjecture. The idea is simple. You take any number. If it's even, you cut it in half. If it's odd, you triple it and add 1. And the amazing thing is, no matter what number you start with, it seems like it always finds its way back down to 1.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway from this whole framework. And it's a pretty profound one. In this kind of system, nothing is ever really broken or lost. Every split, every moment of pain and separation, it's not damage. It's actually a necessary step. It's the operative phase that makes the return to unity not just possible, but computable. You know, this framework gives us a completely unique lens to look through, viewing Scripture not just as a story to be read, but as a living process that's still unfolding. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. If this cosmic engine is always running, what problem is it working on right now?